74 new players are trade eligible on December 15th, so a ton of deals are about to go down, right? Not so fast. Plus, which player will be the biggest name traded this year and which team is most likely to make a trade? And the NBA renames their awards. It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On NBA. Let's go.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Locked On NBA, the daily podcast covering everything you want to know about the association. And on Wednesdays, I'm Jake Madison at NOLA Jake on Twitter and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
I'm Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers, filling in for your usual Wednesday co-host John Corrales of Locked On Celtics. Lots to get to today, Jake. Trade season right around the corner.
It's here, right? Like it starts on Thursday, December 15th. Basically, everybody can be traded more or less in the NBA. So let the silly season commence. And of course, thank y'all for making a Locked On NBA your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, rotating hosts covering the biggest stories around the NBA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch and comment on YouTube. So Tony, I have one of these that's going to be really specific towards you coming up here in a second, though. So we got December 15th. Players can be traded. You know, names like Goran Dragic, Andre Drummond, some others become trade eligible after signing their contracts this offseason. So it means everything can start, right? So right off the bat, do you expect trades to start going down right away?
Not really. You know, usually teams don't jump on it right in December. Like, I think there was one December trade last year, like Cam Reddish to the Knicks. And the Knicks are usually one of the teams that actually start early. And speaking of Cam Reddish, we might talk about him today. But outside of, you know, maybe one deal that happens before January, usually everything happens, you know, late January, February as the deadline gets closer.
Yeah, that's usually they kind of need that deadline to force moves to be made. So don't everyone go run into the trade machine just yet, firing it up, expecting some of these deals to go down. The first trade last year, by the way, was January 3rd. So it wasn't even in December. So as you said, it's kind of rare that ends up happening, but it's fun to start thinking about things. Teams are starting to separate themselves a little bit, and you can maybe see some buyers and sellers emerging, certainly. And I think this is going to be a busy trade deadline as we get closer to it. But let me throw this out. On Wednesdays, we do real or fake. I got two real or fakes for this show today. Right off the bat, real or fake, John Collins is going to be the biggest name traded this season.
On one hand, I want to say yes. Like, he averaged over 20 points a game his second year of his career, double-double guy. Like, he's really good. On the other hand, I think I've heard that John Collins is available for 3 years at this stage. Like, I'll kind of believe it when I see it. It seems like either the Hawks have too high of an asking price or aren't as willing to move him as reports necessarily suggest. So I don't know. I mean, he's good, but between the Hawks' apparently lofty goals of a deal and the fact that maybe some other good players, there's always one star that randomly becomes available. Maybe Kevin Durant decides he wants to be moved. I think someone bigger than John Collins will be shipped.
Yeah, right. Like at times I want to say it's real, and then I think, why haven't they traded him yet and just gotten a deal done right now, right? Like, it's kind of a similar thing. I almost reframe this question as the biggest name player traded is going to be Myles Turner, and it's kind of the same idea, right? Like, are they actually going to trade him this year, or is it just always in talks sort of thing? And I don't really know, right? Like, it's, as you said, I'll believe it when I see it, but Turner, any insight there?
Well, the slight difference for the Pacers and Turner this year compared to every single other time he's been on the trade block is that his contract is expiring. So this year is their last chance to actually get something for Turner. And like you mentioned earlier, deadlines do spur action. Well, this time the deadline is you trade him for something or you could lose him for nothing, which was not a threat in past trade situations. So Turner, I think, unlike Collins, who has lots of years left on his deal, actually, seems like he would be more likely to be moved, although the Pacers are kind of surging. Who knows what their goals are now, as they're still 500. But yeah, it seems like compared to the past, Turner is a little bit more likely to be dealt this time.
Yeah, that's who I'd put it on. I think I have a couple of other dark horses, though. Is there anyone you think is the number one guy then that's going to be traded?
It's hard to, like, Bojan Bogdanovic seems somewhat likely. Like, the Pistons very strategically gave him an extension that still allows him to be traded during the season, right? They get him, they up his value, and they flip him. Especially, I think we're only a day removed, right, from hearing that Cade Cunningham's out for the season.
Yeah.
Like, really, the Pistons' direction has been chosen for them by his shin injury. So he seems like a guy pretty likely to be shipped. And I don't know who it would be from the Knicks, but given that they have a million guards and not as many front court guys. They seem like a team ripe to make a move, but I'm not sure who it would be between a lot of the guys they've named. Seems like Cam Reddish is the most likely, but who knows?
Yeah, they're in a weird spot. The Knicks, I think, right? We'll get into them in a second. I think we'll talk about them in the second segment. We talk about like teams that need to make a trade, and they kind of feel like one. What about a guy like Colin Sexton, who signed a somewhat team-friendly-ish deal as part of that signing trade to Utah? If they don't keep winning, could he get on the move? His contract this year is $16.5 million. Before that injury, he looked like he was going to be an all-star and really start to kind of make his mark in the league, and that changed it. But that's a guard that maybe either coming off the bench or starting for a number of teams could make a difference.
Yeah, is any Jazz player safe, right? Zach Lowe said it best. I don't think they planned to have the collection of players that they have. They just kind of ended up with them after trading Mitchell and Gobert. So it seems like they're still going to be in team reshaping mode as the season progresses.
Yeah, speaking of the Jazz, they do play the New Orleans Pelicans tonight. We're recording this early, so if you want to catch up on everything going on around the NBA, check out the NBA game-to-game feed. We got 1-minute recaps from each side. It's a great way to catch up on everything going on around the association. Those people, the local hosts, know their teams. They got the biggest stories there. They're going to cover it for you. NBA game-to-game. It's on Locked On NBA feeds wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Do you expect a busy deadline trade season this year anyway?
This one is a weird because there's a lot of different stuff going on. One is that I guess the Bucks and Celtics have separated themselves. A lot of the league feels wide open. So on one hand, you could say there's going to be a lot of buyers, right? Teams that think, oh, this could be the year we get to whatever, the conference finals, the second round, whatever the goal is for the specific team. On the other side of that token is a 7'3" Frenchman who can hit one-legged three, Victor Wembanyama plus Scoot Henderson, right? It's a very talented draft even beyond those guys. So maybe the sellers are going to be really strong. So the trouble I have right now is it's hard for me to tell if the market's going to go one direction or the other between buyers and sellers. But I think there will be some activity more activity than maybe last year, for example, just because, one, there is that open field, and two, there is such an obvious, rush to the bottom incentive that a lot of teams will try to really iron out their direction in February if they can.
Yeah, that seems like the Jazz, right? They're kind of stuck in this middle territory right now where it seemed like they wanted to tank. That was the plan for them. And then, their guys are playing well. Markkanen looks good. Colin Sexton's been okay for them too, I think. And you can't really get a sense of what they want to do. I think there's some value in making the play-in tournament for a lot of these teams and trying to use that as a springboard for success. But then you mentioned Wembanyama, and you have to figure the teams at the bottom. Like, no reason not to sell off. Like, if you're the Detroit Pistons with Bogdanovich, looking at it from their perspective, it sounds great to keep him and kind of be a mentor to some of those younger guys on that team. But at the same time, man, you could get a top 2 pick, and that looks super appealing in this draft. And, if you don't get Wembanyama, you get Scoot Henderson, and that doesn't seem too bad either. And with Cade Cunningham done for the year, it really seems like those bottom teams just might start selling off all of their pieces because there's no reason not to. And I think that is where you'll try and see teams kind of like picking from it, but it also could drive the prices for these guys up if a lot of teams do think they're in the running. Like, the West seems particularly open this year.
Agreed. So Bogdanovich is one with Detroit, Terrence Ross with the Magic, lesser talented player. Like what use does he have on that team? Gary Harris as well. Eric Gordon's been on the trade block for a couple years.
That's a great one. Yeah.
With the Rockets, like those kind of guys, I think will be really available this year in the race to the bottom. But I agree with you. The West specifically is what makes it so fascinating. The Pelicans, who you cover, are doing awesome, right? And they're at the top of the West, but how many games separate the 3 seed and the play-in ending right now? It's 2.5, right? Like, it's such a jumbled mess that if it stays pretty close, which it seems like it will, all these teams are going to want some reinforcements to try to separate themselves, and that could lead to a buyer's market.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see it play out, and I have no doubt that we're going to be getting a lot of rumors and things like that coming up over the next couple of weeks as we start to head towards 2023 when the trade deadline is going to be more active. So we've talked about the players. I like that you threw Eric Gordon in there. I do think a first-round pick for him, it seems kind of crazy to me, but he's a name that's kind of always been on the block too. But what are some teams that feel like they need to make a move? They need to make a trade to try and improve their chances. Is there one team in particular that stands above the others? We're going to look at that that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want whenever you want it from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or a luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. You can rent a DeLorean on there, by the way. You can get a DeLorean to drive to whatever it is you need to show off to your friends, which I think is super cool. And you can find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B, or test drive that new vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can deliver the car right to you, and every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com, Turo.com. And thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about the association completely free. Now for your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, Tony, we get some trade talk in December, which is nice to kind of break up the middle of the season here. We just went over some of the players most likely to be traded. Let's look at some of the teams here. So another real or fake, which we do every Wednesday. Real or fake, the Lakers are the team that needs to make a trade the most.
I'll say fake. Fake.
Oh, okay.
They are definitely near the top of the list to me, and is because they finally found some footing, right? They are still not great. 11-15 is not good, but they started awful. I forget exactly what it was, like
2-7, something like that.
Yeah. So they've clearly like been about a little over 500 since then. Like found some footing. Anthony Davis has been incredible, right? Like that's a team where they could go, oh yeah, okay. We believe if we get the right pieces in, we're good enough to be a playoff threat. I don't know if that's true, but that I get how they could think that. And thus, they seem like a team that is pretty likely they don't have a ton of assets, but likely to try to find some sort of reinforcements. I have an unpopular-ish take on the team that needs to make a trade the most, if you are okay with that.
Yeah, it's here.
Play-in team in the West, the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks, 14-13, Luka, MVP caliber season, probably in the top 3 to 5 of that award right now. And their second best player depends who's having a hot night, right? Sometimes it's Hardaway, sometimes it's Spencer Dinwiddie, sometimes it's Christian Wood, and like those guys are good, but it feels like they need something else in terms of really solid juice to help Luka, right? They had Jalen Brunson, who had an awesome playoff run last year to get him to the conference finals. He's in New York now, right? I feel like they're a team that needs to make a move to really push themselves into contention because Luka's that good. They could be that good right now, especially in an open West. They seem like a team that should be the top, near or at the top of that list.
That's a pretty good one, actually. Luka's averaging over 33 points per game, almost 9 assists, 9 rebounds per, and they're still underperforming, it feels like, right? It's got kind of shades of Russell Westbrook when he was on the Thunder, his MVP season, when he averaged a triple-double and the team around him was just terrible and they weren't good, and they were like the 6th seed or something like that, and everyone was just like, oh, okay, he desperately should get out of there. He needs some help. I see shades of that with that Mavericks team right now. It's just Luka dragging this team as far as he can, which, look, he's an MVP candidate for a reason because he's doing that, but they need something else. Like, I don't think Christian Wood's as bad of a fit as what a lot of people are saying. There's probably some head coaching issues going on there too, to a certain degree. But you make a good point. They need another guy. They need a running mate for Luka Doncic who could probably score over 20 points per game. They don't have another guy anywhere close to that right now. Could really use some help there. What about a team like the Philadelphia 76ers that seem like they're disappointing too? You've got Joel Embiid, who's been a monster. Harden's been injured, but it feels like their offseason moves haven't really worked out for them.
Yeah, Melton's been pretty good for them, but between the Harden injury and PJ Tucker hasn't been as good as maybe they hoped. Same with Daniel House. I think they thought they'd be much better. I think a lot of people thought they'd be much better. The trouble with the Sixers is, what do they have to give up? Maxi's worth way too much to trade for anybody of substance that they would want, but they don't have the salary or picks to really do anything else after the Harden trade last year. It's kind of a tough spot for them to be one of the more likely teams or needy teams, to make a move.
Yeah, like they're definitely one that I think needs to make a move and do something. And I just have no idea what that is. Like no clue what that is at all, but it feels like they are disappointing. They seemed like they should have been a top 3 seed in the East. And maybe when they get healthy, they will be. But it feels right now when you watch them that, oh, that didn't great work. Like Montrezl Harrell hasn't been good for them whatsoever. You know, they kind of banked on these like aging veterans and none of it really kind of came forward for them. It's get kind of weird with it here. What about a team like the Warriors? Do the 2 timelines thing isn't really working out like we would have thought? Yeah, like not at all, right? They're disappointing. They've climbed back to be a little bit better, but is it time to maybe go all in one direction, which certainly would be, the vets and the winning right now?
Yeah, look at Atlanta last year. They had all these young guys around Trey who were really good, and they said they need to make a consolidation trade these young guys for stuff, and they said, okay. And they traded Kevin Huerter in separate deals, but they still traded away some of their young guys like Kevin Huerter, a bunch of picks. And now they have DeJounte Murray, and they're trying to be better. Like, it feels like the Warriors are due for a consolidation trade with some of these young guys for talent right now. I understand the idea of 2 timelines. Your timeline is Steph Curry. If he's on your team, he is your timeline. I think it's that simple. The Warriors and Lakers are probably really close in terms of the team I think it needs to trade the most. Like, I was just looking through the standings to look at teams, and all 4 teams, 9 through 12 in the East, right? Toronto, Miami, Chicago, and Washington all probably thought they'd be better this year. Like, they all seem like they would like to add reinforcements. Are they more likely to make a trade than the Lakers, though? Maybe Miami. They're always aggressive in this stuff, but I don't know about the other 4 teams given their current situation. So it's hard to say teams under the guise of more or less likely than the Lakers that need to do something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, look, it's not a perfect question here on Real or Fake. I was actually just about to bring up the Miami Heat and the Toronto Raptors. It feels like the Heat definitely do. Yeah. They need to do something because it's not working. Toronto, I'm not ready to panic on just yet, though Nick Nurse is kind of raising a couple of questions for me with some of his rotation choices, looking like a younger Tom Thibodeau there with everything. But Miami is kind of, as you said, they're always aggressive. Certainly they're not going to be content with where they are. I just also don't know what they're supposed to do either, because whatever trade they make is going to be fine. But if Kyle Lowry's underperforming, who was a big free agent signing for them, last year, and then Jimmy Butler's out of the lineup, are they just going to win any games? And does it truly matter? And I'm not sure that it does. They're in a weird spot, I think, to a degree.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of flexibility. Like they clearly would like to get better, but their big pieces to make moves is like Hero and Bam, and they're a big part of why the Heat are kind of good when they're at their best, right? So do you really want to ship them out? It's hard for them to find an upgrade, and that's similar to how I feel about Chicago, where that team is really underperforming, and their big move would be Patrick Williams. Does he even have that much value anymore? It's hard for them to find the right pieces also to make a big move, but also, after they were really good until Lonzo got hurt last year, are they really going to dump LaVine or DeRozan? It doesn't seem like it, but they're 11-15. They can't just ride this out with the team that they have.
You're reading my mind. They were the next team I was going to bring up, and I was going to say from the opposite standpoint, not making a trade to bring more talent in, because it feels like their season's gone off the rails a little bit already, and it seems like they should be one of those teams that's the bottom of the standings look pretty good. Maybe we should get on down there and try and get into all of this, right? So, do you trade a guy? You could keep LaVine. Do you trade DeRozan, who I think was better than LaVine last year, but there's the age and everything to kind of factor into that. But it definitely feels like they should try and sell off pieces and not be as competitive this year, right? Dragic is one. I don't know how much value he has around the league. Drummond is one, so they can sell certain things off. But until you move some of those big name guys at the top that they try to kind of build around, I don't know. And they're in a weird one, but where they are just seems like an awful spot to be in this season, where you're barely sniffing the play-in tournament, probably not. And you're not going to end up with one of the top, say, 8 picks in this draft. That's just a horrible position to be in for where they are right now.
Yeah, their pick's going to Orlando, but it is protected for the top something. I can't remember, but that would be big incentive to get down there too, is so you keep your own pick, right? If you're having a lost season, you might as well try to make something out of it.
Yeah, they're an interesting one. I think there's a couple other teams you could be okay, you guys just start packing it in, sell off whoever. You look at Washington, right? Bradley Beal there too. Do they need to move him? Though I can't remember if he can be traded or not.
Losses in a row for the Wizards. They are in a tricky spot.
So like they have that going on. There's a number of teams that should make a trade to bring a player in and try and get better. And I think you can easily, with the draft that's coming up, make a claim that there's a number of teams that should also trade guys away to try and go get one of the top guys in the draft. And maybe, as you said, the buyers and sellers will start to differentiate themselves and we'll see a more active trade deadline this year. So let's move on from that because it's going to be on ice for a little bit. And the NBA now has unveiled some new names and trophies for the end of the season. We see Tony, even though he's in the festive spirit there, rolling his eyes. We'll get into that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA. Before we do that, though, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. So you can get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, whether that's pro football to college bowl season, basketball to the World Cup. They've got it all over at betonline.net. And if maybe you want to bet on the NBA futures, get in on the MVP award, which now has a new name, or most improved player, or sixth man of the year. They've got all of the futures that you could want over at betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to go there to learn more about the trends in action and happening right now over at betonline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. And thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen. Again, today and every day. We're here 5 days a week, completely free. The best hosts on the network, breaking down everything you want to know about the association. Now for your second listen, if you want to catch up on the action from last night, the games around the NBA, you've got Lakers Celtics, you've got Pelicans Jazz, you've got Bucks Warriors. It was a good night. They're covering it all over at Game to Game NBA on the Locked On NBA channel, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Tony, I know you're excited to talk about the new awards here. The NBA has unveiled new names and redesigned trophies for the big end of season awards. To run down the list here, it's now the Michael Jordan Trophy, which is awarded to the, I'll use the official verbiage here, the Kia NBA Most Valuable Player. The Jerry West Trophy, which is to the Clutch Player of the Year. That one's interesting, which I want to talk about. Hakeem Olajuwon Trophy, Defensive Player of the Year. Wilt Chamberlain, Rookie of the Year. John Havlicek, NBA's Sixth Man of the Year. And the George Mikan Trophy for the NBA's Most Improved Player. You hate this, don't you? I can already see it.
I don't get why they did this. Did they need to do this? Did they need to change the awards? Everybody understood the old thing with no names. The only real change we have is this Clutch Player of the Year award, which I actually think sounds like a bad idea.
It's a horrible idea. It's a horrible idea, right?
It's a horrible label to have as a player, I feel like, and it just seems very unnecessary. Although, look, they got us talking about it, and it's another award for people to talk about in terms of the Clutch Player, and you'll always be talking about the history of the guy that's on the trophy every time it's awarded to somebody, right, which is what the league wanted. I suppose the person who wanted this is the league, the NBA as a collective, but it just seems like kind of why? I don't understand the timing or purpose of this. To do them all at once, especially, and to add in one that I think was a terrible idea to add. Just add Offensive Player of the Year, get it over with, and then that should have been it. But I digress.
No, you're not wrong, right? They just did this, and John and I talked about it last week, the week before, where they have the regular season's wins trophy, and it's like, what's the point of that one too, right?
Well, actually, I think that one's good. They need to make the regular season more important to teams. I don't know if that trophy will actually make people care, but I think that's important to make the regular season.
Whose name is on the trophy for the regular season wins? Exactly. So it doesn't matter. It kind of proves the point, right? Yeah. Players are going to not going to want to rest to go win whatever that trophy is that doesn't come with like $15 million, which is probably what you would need to do to make teams care. Also, and we said this last week, if any team posts that trophy at the end of the season or during the postseason and doesn't win the NBA title, like you post that on Twitter, you're just going to get it's going to be savage against that social media team that does that. But these trophies, look, I sure, like, why not throw the names on it? Who cares? Like, it's not a big deal. I have no problem with, Michael Jordan being on the MVP trophy. I think some of the other ones are a little bit kind of strange to me. Jerry West, sure, being known as Mr. Clutch, I think that one's kind of fine. But George Mikan led the league in scoring his rookie year, so does he really need to be on the Most Improved Player award when maybe he wouldn't have improved that much and he was already good when he came in? Like, those are the type of things that I look at this and it's like, why are you kind of doing that? And I get it, they're probably doing it from the Mikan drill, which people have been doing for decades, trying to improve their game. It's just kind of weird, right? Like, Hakeem being on Defensive Player of the Year, sure, but should that be one like towards Dwight Howard? Like, could he have a claim for being on that? I would hope not, but it's I don't know. It's like you said, it's kind of weird, right? Like, why do this?
Yeah, and I don't like. Obviously, they chose legendary players. Like,
no one's naming an award after Dwight Howard.
Well, Kareem has like a lot of MVPs. He's not that one. Like Dikembe Mutombo, Ben Wallace. Like,
yeah,
they're the defensive guy. You could do this for every award. It's not. I don't want to nitpick. Like the name is not a big deal, and they picked very talented, legendary.
Yeah,
players. It's not like I'm like, why did they pick this guy? But it's like it's just odd the way it's all been presented, and I don't get the addition of clutch player. They could have added comeback player of the year, which is always like actually interesting.
Yeah,
like, story of recovery. They didn't do that. I don't know. It felt very, especially right now, December 13th. Like what? This is like an all-star break kind of announcement to me. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff behind this that I don't know.
The clutch one's interesting, right? Because so the way it works is head coaches are going to nominate players, and then a panel of journalists is going to vote for the clutch player of the year, which is certainly going to go over so well, right? And then like, is anyone clutch in the regular season? Like, does that matter if you're clutch in the regular season?
When I saw the award, I was like, oh, like just give it to Dame every year, right? Like he's the one guy that has the rep, but like from year to year, very rarely is a guy considered clutch from year to year.
Right. It's just, and also, again, does it matter that much? Like, yeah, I love Damian Lillard and what he's doing, but does he have a title, and is that going to be held against him at the end of his career? Yeah, right. And he'll go down as this clutch player who was never capable of winning at all. And it's like, it feels like that should be a postseason award or something like that. But then I don't know if you'll ever really have someone who kind of rises up to that, right? Like, I wouldn't say guys are regularly hitting, there's not like 5 guys that are really hitting game winners consistently across the league over 82 games. So you said it's just like such a weird award that's just going to spark insane debate on Twitter.
Yeah.
Which is probably what they want.
I actually think it's going to have like this opposite effect where it's like, whoever wins it this year, it doesn't matter, but pretend it's Dame, right? So then next year, for your Pelicans, right? The Pelicans beat the Blazers, and Jose Alvarado shuts down Dame at the end of the game, right? Like you can put it in your story, like Jose Alvarado shuts down the Jerry West Award winner at the buzzer. Like that feels like it's more impactful.
Okay,
holding the trophy, I like it. And then it's like, oh, is Dame really clutch? Like, does he deserve this award? Like, it's just a useless cycle of conversation. Because those shots are so difficult that like make you considered a clutch guy. Also, like clutch defense is really important, and I guarantee you, no one who's a good clutch defender is ever going to win this award.
No, you're not going to get this or game-winning blocks, right? or game-winning charges taken, or anything like that. That would be amazing. That should open it up to that, I think. But you're right. That's never going to happen whatsoever. Look, you say it's kind of pointless, yet we're talking about it here on our Locked On NBA national show that's supposed to cover the biggest stories around the NBA. So in a sense, I think it worked, but I don't know. It'll be cool. Like you're right. It'll be nice to say, Zion Williamson, for example, wins the Michael Jordan MVP award. I kind of hate that Kia is like engraved on the awards and you have the corporate sponsor on there, which look, I get it, but whatever. That's not too great. I don't know. Do you think this motivates players to be the first winners of these this season? Like the first to win the Michael Jordan MVP award?
Does anyone remember that Steph was the first conference finals MVP or whatever it was last year? I don't even remember who won it in the East. I'm assuming it was Tatum. No, I don't think there's any motivation.
I tried to kind of put some meaning behind it. I don't think I really succeeded there though.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. I mean, I think they'll be happier to have their like name mentioned in the same breath as the legend, which is why they went with the most legendary player for all of them. But that's kind of it. I don't think it adds any extra motivation more than the actual trophy and timeless name of your name is now ingrained in the league history. I think that is way more important than what you actually win and what it's called.
Yeah, probably. All right, the NBA one day will find a way to make the regular season like truly matter, right?
Who's like the most legendary NBA journalist? You could go with a lot of people, but like Lee Sterling, for example. This is the Lee Sterling Locked On NBA podcast. Like that just sounds dumb. You don't have to put a name on everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. That doesn't sorry, Lee Sterling, but like,
No, he's awesome. I don't even apologize.
no. I get you. It's funny though. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't work. Okay, there you go. It's a bad idea. Let us know in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube if you agree or disagree. Was it a nice touch? Was it completely pointless, or is it just like, whatever? It doesn't matter at all. And that's probably as good of a spot to wrap up Locked On NBA here as any. So thank you all for listening. As always, I'm your host Jake Madison at NOLA Jake on Twitter and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Tony, you can say bye too.
Oh, bye everybody. Thanks for listening today. Tomorrow, Nick Angstad, Pat the Designer, will bring you the latest and greatest from around the league. You won't want to miss that either.
And check out NBA Game to Game. Catch up on all of the games the night before with the local host, giving you their best insight on it. NBA Game to Game on the same feed as Locked On NBA. And that's going to do it. And we'll see y'all next week.